Welcome to Lore of the Rings, where we explore the secret paths of Middle-earth and share the stories Tolkien never told. Before we dive in, take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from and whether this tale has found you by day or by night. The sun descends toward the western horizon, casting long fingers of gold and crimson across the gray havens. White sails billow in the autumn wind, catching the last breath of Middle-earth before turning toward waters no mortal map has charted. Upon the deck stands a figure small in stature, yet impossibly immense in significance. Frodo Baggins, the ring-bearer, his eyes fixed upon a distance that transcends mere geography. The waves lap gently against the hull, each rhythm a heartbeat counting down the final moments before departure, before severance, before an ending that feels both inevitable and impossibly cruel. Around him gather the remnants of fellowship and friendship. Gandalf the White, robed in power yet gentle in demeanor. Bilbo, aged beyond his years yet still possessed of that irrepressible curiosity. Galadriel and Elrond, bearing the weight of ages in their immortal gaze. Yet it is Frodo who draws the eye, Frodo whose silence speaks volumes, Frodo whose very presence poses a question that echoes across the gathered crowd and reverberates through the annals of legend itself. Why must he leave? The question hangs in the salt-tinged air like mist, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable by those who remain behind. Sam stands upon the shore, tears streaming down his weathered face, his hand half raised in farewell or perhaps in protest against this final parting. Merry and Pippin stand beside him, their usual merriment extinguished, replaced by a gravity that sits uncomfortably upon their young shoulders. They have seen him return from the quest, have witnessed his homecoming to the Shire, have shared meals and memories in the months since the ring's destruction. Yet something essential has been missing, something vital that no homecoming could restore, no feast could rekindle, no familiar green hill could heal. The harbor master signals. The tide turns. The moment approaches when rope will slip from mooring and Middle-earth will recede into memory. But before the ship embarks upon that final voyage, before Frodo crosses the threshold between the mortal and the timeless, we must understand what drives this departure. For this is no simple journey, no mere retirement to peaceful shores. This is an exile born of necessity, a flight from wounds that run deeper than flesh, a seeking of healing that Middle-earth, for all its beauty, all its triumph, all its hard-won peace, simply cannot provide. Tolkien himself wrote in his letters of Frodo's fate, describing it with a mixture of sorrow and inevitability that pervades all his greatest works. The ring-bearer, he explained, was too deeply wounded in body, mind, and spirit to find rest in the lands he had saved. The quest had taken something from him that could never be restored by mortal means, had carved away pieces of his essential self that no passage of time could regenerate. Middle-earth, for all its wonders, operates within the circles of the world, bound by time and decay, by seasons and mortality. Some wounds require something beyond the circles of the world to mend. The ship creaks. The sails fill. The anchor rises, dripping from the depths. Frodo turns one last time toward the shore, toward the friends who have shared his burden, toward the land he has bled to preserve. His face bears no regret, yet neither does it hold joy. Instead, there rests upon his features an expression of profound weariness mixed with something approaching relief. The look of one who has carried an impossible weight for far too long and now, finally, is permitted to set it down. But why? What invisible chains bind him? What unseen scars drive him from hearth and home toward unknown shores? What darkness persists even after the Dark Lord's fall, even after the ring's unmaking, even after the crowning of the king and the restoration of the realm? As the ship drifts from the harbor, as Middle-earth begins to fade into the gathering dusk, as the last light of day paints the western sky in shades of fire and ash, a question remains, echoing across the water like the cry of distant gulls. What darkness or sorrow could even a hero not endure? To understand Frodo's departure, we must first acknowledge the nature of his wounds, not merely the physical injuries that marked his flesh, but the deeper lacerations that scored his very soul. Tolkien was no stranger to trauma. As a survivor of the Great War, he had witnessed firsthand how certain experiences leave marks that never fully heal, how some battles continue long after the fighting ends, how victory and survival are not always synonymous with wholeness. In the appendices to The Return of the King, Tolkien provides crucial context. Frodo was wounded multiple times during his journey, stabbed by the Morgul blade on Weathertop, struck by the cave troll's spear in Moria, stung by Shelob in the passes of Cirith Ungol, and finally, bitten by Gollum on the slopes of Mount Doom. Each wound carried its own poison, its own particular agony. But the Morgul blade's injury proved most insidious, for it was a wound designed not merely to kill, but to transform, to drag its victim across the threshold between life and undeath, to remake flesh into something other. Though Elrond's healing arts arrested the blade's corruption, they could not entirely undo its effects. The knife had broken within Frodo's shoulder, and though the splinter was extracted, something of its dark nature remained. A sensitivity to evil, a vulnerability to shadow, a connection to the realm of wraiths that could never be entirely severed. On the anniversary of that first wounding, Frodo would fall ill, gripped by pain and darkness, reliving the moment when the Witch King's blade sought his heart. Yet these physical wounds, grievous as they were, represented only the surface of his suffering. Deeper still ran the psychological and spiritual damage wrought by bearing the One Ring. For months, Frodo had carried the concentrated malice of Sauron, the distilled essence of domination and corruption, the weight of absolute evil pressed against his very being. The ring whispered constantly, promising power while eroding will, offering salvation through damnation, seducing even as it enslaved. In his letters, Tolkien wrote extensively about the nature of temptation and corruption in his legendarium. The ring, he explained, did not simply offer power. It represented the ultimate expression of the will to dominate, to reduce all other beings to mere extensions of the self. To bear it was to feel its gravity, its inexorable pull toward dissolution of individual identity, toward the terrible seduction of becoming one with absolute power. Every moment of resistance required an act of will, a conscious rejection of the ring's promises, a small death of the self that desired what the ring offered. For ordinary bearers, this burden would have proven immediately fatal to the spirit. But Frodo possessed unusual strength, not the strength of warriors or kings, but the strength of mercy, of pity, of fundamental goodness. These qualities both protected him and ensured his prolonged torment. He resisted longer than any mortal should have been able to resist, which meant he endured the ring's corruption for far longer than anyone else could have survived. His very virtue became the instrument of his deepest wounding. Scholars of Tolkien's work have long recognized the quest's fundamental tragedy. Frodo succeeded, yet in succeeding, he was destroyed. He delivered Middle-earth from shadow, yet could not deliver himself. He carried the ring to its unmaking, yet could not unmake the changes it had wrought within him. The price of the world's salvation was the sacrifice of his own capacity to dwell within that world. Even the most beloved lands cannot mend a heart broken by ancient evil. The One Ring is gone, unmade in the fires where it was forged, dissolved into nothingness within the cracks of doom. Sauron is fallen, his tower cast down, his armies scattered, his very essence dissipated beyond all hope of return. The Third Age draws toward its close, and a new era dawns for Middle-earth. Victory is total, the celebration justified, the peace hard-won. Yet for Frodo, the ring's destruction marks not an ending but a transformation of his torment. Before Orodruin, the burden was external, a physical object hanging from a chain around his neck, its weight growing with every step toward Mordor, its presence a constant assault but nonetheless separate from the self. There existed, however tenuously, a distinction between Frodo and the thing he carried. His identity, though eroded and besieged, retained its boundaries. He was Frodo Baggins bearing the ring, not yet Frodo Baggins consumed by it. But after the ring's destruction, after that final terrible moment when he claimed it for his own upon the precipice, after Gollum's intervention saved him from his own failure, the distinction blurred. The ring had touched him so deeply, had intertwined itself so thoroughly with his being, that its removal left a void, a negative space shaped exactly like the object that had filled it. He had carried absolute evil, had felt its weight and whispered promises, had tasted its power, and finally, most damningly, had succumbed to its temptation. This final failure haunted him more deeply than any wound. For in the end, at the culmination of all his suffering and sacrifice, he had not cast the ring into the fire. He had claimed it, had declared himself its master, had, for one terrible instant, become the very thing he had struggled so long to resist. That Gollum intervened, that accident and providence conspired to accomplish what will could not, does not erase the moment of surrender. In his own eyes, Frodo had failed. Tolkien addresses this explicitly in his letters, defending Frodo's choice while acknowledging its weight. No one, he argued, could have resisted the ring at the point of its making, in the heart of Sauron's power, after bearing it so far and enduring so much. Frodo's resistance to that point represented a triumph beyond mortal capacity, a heroism so profound that his final failure does not diminish, but rather confirms his extraordinary nature. He achieved the impossible for as long as anyone possibly could have, and his breakdown at the end was not weakness but inevitability. Yet understanding this intellectually and accepting it emotionally are vastly different propositions. Frodo knew what he had done, knew the darkness that had claimed him however briefly, knew that he had looked into the abyss and not merely flinched but embraced it. This knowledge became another wound, perhaps the deepest of all, a wound to his sense of self, to his understanding of who he was and what he was capable of. In the months following his return to the Shire, this burden manifested in subtle ways. The nightmares that plagued his sleep, visions of fire and shadow and the eye searching endlessly for what was lost. The moments of dissociation, when familiar surroundings suddenly seemed alien and hostile. The persistent sensation of something missing, a phantom weight that his hand reached for unconsciously, seeking a chain that no longer hung around his neck. Addiction takes many forms, and though Frodo never desired the ring's return, His body and mind had adapted to its presence, had been reshaped by it, and now struggled to function in its absence. Even in the Shire's gentlest corners, even surrounded by friends and familiar comforts, he remained perpetually aware of the shadow. It colored everything: the taste of food, the sound of laughter, the feel of sunlight on his face. These sensations reached him as if through a veil, muted and distant, separated from him by the immeasurable gulf that now existed between his experiences and those of everyone around him. He walked among the hobbits of the Shire as a ghost walks among the living, present but not truly there, visible but fundamentally apart. The ring is gone, yet its shadow walks with him still, unseen but relentless. In the houses of healing in Minas Tirith, as Frodo lay recovering from his ordeal, Arwen Undomil came to him bearing a gift of profound significance. She offered him her place upon the ships to Valinor, her right as one of elven kind to pass beyond the circles of the world to the undying lands. More than mere passage, she gifted him a white gem upon a silver chain, a token of protection and a promise of healing that mortal Middle-earth could not provide. This gesture, beautiful in its generosity and terrible in its implications, reveals much about both Arwen's sacrifice and Frodo's condition. For Arwen to relinquish her place upon the ships was no small thing. It represented her final and irrevocable choice of mortality, her complete commitment to Aragorn and to the fate of men. Having already forsaken her immortal kindred by choosing mortal love, she now surrendered even the possibility of eventual return to the land of her birth. Her gift to Frodo was not simply a ticket to paradise, but a piece of her own diminished fate, a fragment of what she herself had given up for love. Yet why would such a gift be necessary? Why would a hero who had triumphed, who had destroyed the greatest evil of the age, require extraordinary intervention to find peace? The answer lies in Tolkien's meditation on the nature of mortality and immortality, and the relationship between suffering and healing. In Tolkien's cosmology, the elves are bound to Arda, to the world itself, for as long as it endures. Death, for them, is not true death, but a departure to the halls of Mandos, followed by eventual return or residence in Valinor, a land within the world, yet removed from its corruption, bathed in the light of the two trees that predated sun and moon. Elves who suffer grievous wounds or unbearable sorrow can find healing there, can rest in a place where time moves differently, where the weight of the world lies lighter, where the very air carries the memory of creation untainted by shadow. Men, by contrast, receive the gift of Iluvatar, mortality, the freedom to depart beyond the circles of the world to a fate unknown even to the Valar. This gift, often perceived as a curse by those who fear death, represents ultimate liberation from the world's long defeat, from the entropy that even the elves cannot escape. Yet it also means that mortal suffering must be endured within mortal time, within the confines of bodies that age and break, within minds that cannot simply depart to realms of healing when the burden grows too great. Frodo occupied a strange position between these two fates. As a hobbit, he was subject to mortality, yet as a ring-bearer, he had been marked by something that transcended mortal experience. He had carried an object of power crafted in the depths of time, had borne the malice of an immortal spirit, had been wounded by weapons forged in ages long past. His suffering was not merely mortal, but carried overtones of the timeless, the eternal. Mortal lands, bound by mortal time, could offer him only mortal healing, which is to say, insufficient to his need. Arwen understood this with the clarity of one who stood between worlds. She had chosen mortality for love, yet retained the wisdom and perspective of her immortal heritage. She could see what others might miss, that Frodo's wounds were not the sort that time would heal, that his scars would not fade with years but deepen, that without intervention beyond the ordinary, he would spend whatever life remained to him in increasing pain and isolation. Her gift, therefore, was not reward but necessity, not honor but mercy, not privilege but rescue. The white gem she gave him carried something of the light of Eärendil, her grandfather, who sails the sky bearing a silmaril as a sign of hope. This light had aided Frodo in Shelob's lair, had given him strength when all other strength failed. Now it would guide him to a place where such light was not exceptional but ordinary, where healing was not miraculous but natural, where the accumulated trauma of his quest could be gradually, patiently addressed by powers and presences equipped to handle such profound damage. In this, Tolkien echoes a theme that runs throughout his work, that some wounds are too deep for mortal remedy, that some sorrows exceed the capacity of the world to soothe. Not because the world is insufficient in itself, but because certain experiences place their victims outside the normal current of worldly life. Frodo had ventured beyond the edges of ordinary existence. He could not simply step back into it unchanged and expect to find comfort. The gift acknowledged this reality. Arwen, in her wisdom and compassion, offered him not a solution but an escape, not healing itself but the possibility of healing, not an end to suffering but a place where suffering might, eventually, be understood and integrated, and perhaps, in time measured by different clocks, transcended. Even with the grace of the undying lands, Frodo carries burdens that no mortal land can ease. When the white ship finally departs from the Grey Havens, when it carries Frodo beyond the reach of those who loved him most, it leaves behind a fellowship fractured by absence. The remaining members, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, must somehow continue, must find meaning in a victory that cost them one of their dearest companions, must reconcile the salvation of Middle-earth with the loss of the one who made that salvation possible. For Sam, the grief cuts deepest and most immediate. He had been with Frodo from the beginning, had followed him to the edge of despair and beyond, had literally carried him when strength failed and hope died. Their bond transcended ordinary friendship, entering realms of devotion and sacrifice that few ever experience. Sam had promised to bear Frodo's burden when it grew too heavy, had shared every step of the terrible journey, had witnessed every moment of suffering and degradation. To watch Frodo depart was to have his heart torn from his chest while still beating, to be left alive but fundamentally altered, carrying a grief that would color every remaining day. Yet Sam's grief, though profound, carried a quality of understanding that the others did not. He had seen what the ring did to Frodo, had watched its corruption work in real time, had witnessed the wounds accumulating like layers of sediment until they buried the hobbit he knew beneath strata of pain. If anyone could comprehend why Frodo must leave, it was Sam. This understanding made the parting no less painful, but perhaps more bearable. The grief of necessary loss rather than arbitrary cruelty. Merry and Pippin, who had begun the journey as innocent adventurers seeking excitement beyond the borders of their comfortable lives, returned as warriors and counselors, having served in great battles and walked in the councils of kings. Yet their most profound education came in watching Frodo's transformation, in witnessing what true sacrifice demands. They had fought at Helm's Deep and before the Black Gate, had faced death and despair, had proven their courage beyond question. But they had not borne the ring. They had not endured that particular crucible. Frodo's departure taught them that heroism and survival are not always compatible, that sometimes the cost of victory is measured not in lives lost, but in lives irrevocably changed. For Aragorn, crowned as King Elessar and wed to Arwen, Frodo's leaving carried a weight of obligation and debt that no throne could satisfy. Everything Aragorn had achieved, his kingdom, his crown, his queen, rested upon the foundation of Frodo's success. The ring-bearer's sacrifice had made possible the restoration of Gondor, the reunification of the kingdoms of men, the dawning of a new age. Yet the one who had enabled all this could not remain to witness its flowering. Aragorn, who understood better than most the price of leadership and duty, recognized in Frodo's departure a cost that exceeded even his own considerable sacrifices. As king, he could honor Frodo's memory, could ensure his deeds were remembered and celebrated. But he could not heal him, could not restore what was lost, could not offer him the peace he deserved. Legolas and Gimli, representing the elves and dwarves who had joined the Fellowship, carried their own griefs shaped by their people's perspectives. For Legolas, who would himself eventually depart Middle-earth when longing for the sea became too great, Frodo's leaving presaged his own inevitable fate. The elves were already fading from Middle-earth, already departing for Valinor, already ceding the world to men and the younger races. Frodo's departure was untimely by mortal measure, but fit the pattern of diminishment that characterized the age. Gimli, whose people measured time in stone and mountain root, in permanence and endurance, found in Frodo's leaving a reminder that even the strongest will can be broken, that even stone can be worn away by persistent force. The Fellowship had been 9, then 8 with Gandalf's fall, then fractured with Boromir's death, then scattered by necessity. Now, with Frodo's departure, it lost its heart. The others would continue, Sam to rebuild the Shire and raise his family, Merry and Pippin to serve as knights and chroniclers, Aragorn to rule wisely and well, Legolas and Gimli to explore the world before their own departures. But they would do so always aware of the absence, always conscious of the empty place where Frodo should have been. In this, Tolkien explores one of his most persistent themes. The cost of great deeds ripples outward, affecting not just the heroes but all those connected to them. Victory is rarely clean or complete. Triumph comes with asterisks and qualifications. The world is saved, yes, but at what price? The enemy is defeated, certainly, but who pays the cost? The future is secured, undoubtedly, but who is sacrificed to purchase that security? These questions have no comfortable answers, offer no easy consolations. They simply exist, like the grief itself, like the empty place at the table, like the knowledge that somewhere beyond the circles of the world, Frodo sails toward healing they can neither see nor share. Even as he sails toward peace, the ripples of his absence echo across the lands he saved. Memory becomes its own prison for those who have endured trauma beyond ordinary comprehension. Events replay endlessly, each recollection reinforcing neural pathways of pain, each remembrance reopening wounds that never properly healed. For Frodo, returning to the Shire meant dwelling among people whose memories of his journey were abstract, second-hand, filtered through songs and stories that emphasized glory while eliding agony. They celebrated his triumph while remaining fundamentally incapable of understanding his suffering. The hobbits of the Shire welcomed him home as a hero, which was itself a form of isolation. Heroes exist in stories, in legends, in simplified narratives where suffering is temporary and leads to clear resolution. But Frodo's experience defied simplification. How could he explain to hobbits, who had never left their comfortable holes, what it meant to stand at the crack of doom with the weight of the world hanging from his neck? How could he describe the ring's whispers to those who had never heard temptation speak with the voice of their own deepest desires? How could he convey the particular horror of Shelob's lair, the suffocating darkness of Moria, the endless desolation of Mordor to those whose greatest hardship was bad weather during harvest? He could not, and so he remained silent, which is its own form of exile. The memories accumulated within him like poison with no outlet, each recollection adding to the weight he carried. He remembered every step across the Emin Muil, every stumbling ascent of the endless stairs, every moment of hunger and thirst and cold that had stripped away everything except the necessity of moving forward. He remembered Gollum's eyes in the darkness, Boromir's grasping hands at Ammon Hen, the Morgul blade's burning corruption, Shelob's paralyzing venom. Most of all, he remembered Mount Doom, not just the physical location, but the psychological state it represented. The crushing weight of the ring at its point of creation. The dissolution of his will beneath its power. The moment when he ceased to resist and instead embraced what he had fought so long to reject. This memory above all others tormented him, replaying in dreams and waking visions, an endless loop of his own failure, his own weakness, his own surrender. Tolkien understood that traumatic memory functions differently from ordinary recollection. In his experiences during the First World War, he had witnessed men broken not by single events, but by the accumulation of horror, by the inability to escape memories that pursued them even into safety. He brought this understanding to Frodo's characterization with painful authenticity. The ring-bearer is not simply sad or melancholy in his diminished state. He is haunted, actively tormented by experiences that will not release him. The nightmares came regularly, particularly around the anniversaries of his wounding. October saw him relive Weathertop, feeling phantom pain where the Morgul blade had struck. March brought dreams of Shelob, waking in terror with imagined webs constricting his throat. But the worst came around March 25th, the day of the ring's destruction, when he would lie fevered and delirious, speaking in languages no hobbit should know, calling out to companions living and dead, reliving those final moments on the edge of the abyss. Between these acute episodes existed a chronic condition, a persistent state of disconnection and alienation that colored every waking hour. The Shire's beauty, which should have been a comfort, instead emphasized how separate he had become from the simple pleasures it represented. Food tasted like ash. Music sounded distant and mournful. The laughter of children struck him as almost obscene in its innocence. He existed alongside his fellow hobbits, but no longer among them, present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. This alienation extended even to Sam, despite their profound bond. Sam had shared much of the journey and witnessed much of the suffering, yet even he could not fully comprehend what Frodo had endured. Sam had not carried the ring for months on end, had not felt its weight increasing with every step, had not borne the constant erosion of will and identity. He had supported and protected and sacrificed, but he had not been the bearer. This gap in experience, however small, was nonetheless unbridgeable. Frodo found himself unable to share his deepest pains even with his dearest friend, locked within a solitude that neither affection nor loyalty could fully penetrate. Scholars examining Tolkien's treatment of trauma have noted the sophistication of his approach. Rather than depicting simple sadness or generic suffering, he presents a detailed portrait of post-traumatic experience. The intrusive memories, the emotional numbing, the hypervigilance, the sense of permanent alteration. Frodo is not merely sad about what happened. He is fundamentally changed by it, reorganized at a level so deep that return to his previous self becomes impossible. This impossibility drives his eventual departure. Healing requires environment, a space where traumatic memories can be processed rather than endlessly reinforced, where triggers can be avoided rather than constantly encountered, where identity can be reconstructed rather than daily undermined. The Shire, despite its beauty and peace, despite the love of his friends and the comfort of familiar surroundings, cannot provide such an environment. Every hill reminds him of mountains he climbed in despair. Every shadow recalls the darkness of Mordor. Every comfortable moment contrasts sharply with the suffering that earned it. No song, no laughter, no green hill could ever erase the echoes of that long, terrible journey. Valinor, the undying lands, the blessed realm, the land where the Valar dwell, exists as more than simply a place. It is a state of being, a realm operating under different rules than the mortal lands of Middle-earth. Here, time moves according to its own rhythms, measured not by the decay that governs Middle-earth, but by the endurance of things made in harmony with the music of the Aenir. Here, the light that illuminated the world before the creation of sun and moon still shines, filtered through Talpurian and Laurelin, the two trees whose brightness banishes all shadow. Into this realm, Frodo sails seeking what Middle-earth cannot provide, not mere rest, but healing of a fundamental kind, restoration that addresses not symptoms but root causes, peace that penetrates to the level where trauma has reorganized his very being. The permission granted to ring-bearers to make this journey acknowledges something profound. Certain wounds exceed the world's capacity to heal them. Certain experiences place their victims outside the normal scope of mortal remedy. The journey itself carries symbolic weight. To sail to Valinor is to pass beyond the circles of the world, to leave behind the realm of decay and mortality, to enter a space where different laws apply. For Frodo, this passage represents necessary severance, a cutting of ties to places and experiences that can only reinforce his trauma, an escape from a land that, however beautiful, however beloved, has become a prison of painful association. What awaits him there remains deliberately ambiguous in Tolkien's telling. We receive no detailed account of Frodo's life in Valinor, no confirmation of healing achieved or peace attained. This omission is itself significant. Tolkien resisted simple resolutions, easy answers, neat conclusions that wrapped up complex problems with convenient solutions. Frodo's fate in the Undying Lands remains open, possible rather than certain, hoped for rather than guaranteed. Yet hints exist throughout the text, and in Tolkien's letters suggesting the nature of what Valinor might offer. The land itself possesses healing properties absent from Middle-earth. Its very air carries vitality and restoration. The beings who dwell there, the Valar and Maiar, the ancient elves who passed over the sea, the spirits who never descended into corruption, possess wisdom and power sufficient to address even the deepest wounds. Time, functioning differently, allows for healing processes impossible within mortal measure. Consider what this might mean practically for Frodo's condition. The traumatic memories that plague him in Middle-earth, the nightmares, the intrusive recollections, the persistent sense of threat, these might gradually lose their power in a place where the darkness they recall has never reached. The ring's lingering corruption, the subtle ways it reshaped his mind and soul, might be addressed by beings who understand the nature of such evil and possess tools to counteract it. The profound isolation and alienation he experiences among the hobbits of the Shire might ease in a place where others, Bilbo, Gandalf, the elves, carry their own ancient sorrows and deep knowledge of suffering. The healing offered would not be quick or miraculous in the sense of instant erasure. Tolkien distrusted such easy magic. Rather, it would unfold gradually, measured in the slow time of Valinor, through processes of rest and contemplation and gentle restoration. Frodo would not forget. Tolkien makes clear in his work that true healing does not require forgetting, but he might, eventually, remember without being destroyed by his memories. He might integrate his experiences rather than being fragmented by them. He might become, in time, whole in a new way, shaped by suffering but no longer ruled by it. The land itself facilitates this process. Imagine Frodo walking in gardens where every flower blooms in perpetual beauty, where decay is absent and death unknown. Imagine him resting beside streams that carry memory of their creation in the music of the Aenir, waters that have never been corrupted or poisoned. Imagine him dwelling in spaces where the very architecture reflects harmony and peace, where every element exists in balance, where discord and evil have never gained foothold. More than environment, though, Valinor offers community. Not the well-meaning but uncomprehending community of the Shire, but fellowship with others who understand the weight of great deeds and terrible experiences. Gandalf, who has walked in shadow and returned. The elves, who carry memories of ages and bear their own ancient griefs. Bilbo, who, though less deeply wounded, nonetheless understands something of the ring's burden. Among such companions, Frodo might find the understanding and acceptance that healing requires, the ability to speak his truth without explanation or justification, to simply exist without pretense or performance. Middle-earth offers courage and triumph, but some wounds can only be soothed where time itself bends to mercy. The concept of heroism in Tolkien's work resists simplification. Unlike many fantasy traditions that equate heroism with martial prowess or spectacular achievement, Tolkien's heroes are more often defined by what they endure than what they accomplish, by what they sacrifice than what they gain, by their suffering than their success. Frodo embodies this understanding perhaps more completely than any other character in the legendarium. Consider the nature of his heroism. He did not slay the Dark Lord in single combat. He did not lead armies to victory or demonstrate superhuman strength. He did not wield magical power or command great forces. His heroism consisted of something simultaneously simpler and infinitely more difficult. He kept walking. He bore an unbearable burden. He resisted corruption that would have instantly destroyed lesser beings. He chose, again and again, to continue when every rational calculation said to stop, when every instinct screamed surrender, when every fiber of his being cried out for release. This form of heroism extracts a cost that battlefield valor does not. A warrior might die in glorious combat, might find honor in their final stand, might be remembered in songs that emphasize their strength and courage. But Frodo's heroism offered no glory, no spectacular moments of triumph, no clean ending. Instead, it ground him down incrementally. Each day's journey another small death, each mile another piece of himself sacrificed to necessity. He was not killed but slowly destroyed, not defeated in single combat, but eroded by persistent pressure, until the person who finally reached Mount Doom bore only superficial resemblance to the hobbit who had departed from Rivendell. Tolkien explores this through careful attention to Frodo's deterioration across the narrative. In the early chapters, he displays humor and resilience, sings songs, engages in philosophical discussions. By Lothlorien, he is already changed, more serious, more burdened, less inclined to joy. By the time he enters Mordor, he has become almost spectral, a hollow thing driven by will alone, sustained more by Sam's devotion than his own diminished strength. On the slopes of Mount Doom, he is described as crawling, barely conscious, fundamentally broken, yet still moving forward through sheer force of purpose. This progression illuminates the price of his heroism. Every step demanded sacrifice. Every choice to continue meant accepting another layer of damage. Every moment of resistance against the ring's corruption carved away another piece of who he had been. He paid for Middle-earth's salvation not with a single dramatic gesture, but with incremental self-destruction over months of unrelenting torment. The final moment at the crack of doom crystallizes this cost. Frodo, having endured everything necessary to reach that point, having demonstrated more courage and will than should be possible for any mortal being, finally breaks. He claims the ring. He surrenders to its power. He fails at the moment of ultimate test. That Gollum's intervention completes the task does not change the fact of Frodo's failure. Indeed, it emphasizes it, showing that even the most heroic will has limits, that even the strongest resistance can be overcome, that some evils are simply too powerful for direct confrontation. Yet Tolkien insists this failure does not diminish Frodo's heroism, but confirms it. In his letters, he argues that Frodo accomplished the impossible by resisting as long as he did, that his eventual breakdown was inevitable given the circumstances, that expecting him to cast the ring into the fire at that point would be to demand something beyond mortal capacity. Frodo's heroism lies not in perfect victory, but in getting to the point where Providence could intervene, not in succeeding through his own power, but in enduring long enough for grace to operate. This understanding of heroism, complex, costly, imperfect, marks Tolkien's work as distinct from simpler adventure narratives. His heroes suffer consequences for their deeds. They bear scars that never heal. They achieve necessary victories that nonetheless extract terrible prices. They save the world but cannot save themselves. This tragic dimension pervades even the most triumphant moments, reminding us that victory and wholeness are not synonymous, that survival and healing diverge, that some costs cannot be calculated in advance and can never be fully paid. Frodo's departure to Valinor embodies this tragic heroism. He succeeded in his quest, destroyed the ring, saved Middle-earth. Yet he cannot remain to enjoy what he has saved, cannot dwell in the peace his sacrifice secured, cannot find rest in the land he bled to preserve. His heroism earned the world its future, but cost him his own. This is not fair, not just, not proportionate to desert. It simply is the brutal arithmetic of sacrifice, the uncompromising calculus of great deeds. The Fellowship understood this, however painfully. They did not question Frodo's right to depart or suggest he should remain. They recognized, perhaps without fully articulating it, that he had given everything, that no more could be asked, that his leaving was not abandonment, but the final act of a tragedy that began the moment he accepted the ring. Their grief at his departure was grief for the cost of victory, for the recognition that even triumph carries unbearable weight, for the knowledge that heroes are not rewarded with happiness, but with survival if they are fortunate and oblivion if they are not. Frodo was fortunate in the end. He survived. He found escape. He sailed toward possibility of healing. But survival is not triumph, and escape is not victory, and possibility is not certainty. He departed Middle-earth not in glory but in necessary exile, not celebrated but mourned, not whole but broken and seeking wholeness beyond the circles of the world. Triumph carries a weight no celebration can lift, and no hearth can ever fully comfort. The destruction of the ring did not eliminate evil from Middle-earth, a fact Tolkien emphasized repeatedly in his work. The Dark Lord fell, yes, and his armies scattered, and his strongholds were cast down. But evil itself, the capacity for corruption and cruelty and domination that Sauron exemplified, remained woven into the fabric of the world. It would take new forms, express itself through different agents, find new methods and new victims. The victory won at such terrible cost was not permanent but provisional, not final but temporary, not absolute but conditional. For Frodo, this reality manifested both externally and internally. Externally, he returned to find the Shire under the control of Saruman, diminished, yes, but still capable of inflicting pain and oppression. The scouring of the Shire, that bitter coda to the epic quest, demonstrated that even home could be corrupted, that even the most isolated and innocent places harbor potential for tyranny, that the struggle against evil is never truly finished. Though he and his companions liberated the Shire, the experience reinforced the lesson that peace is fragile and victory incomplete. Internally, Frodo's struggle continued long after the ring's destruction. The corruption he had endured did not simply evaporate when the object of that corruption was unmade. It had reshaped him at fundamental levels, his perceptions, his emotions, his sense of self, and these changes persisted. The darkness he had carried had become part of him, not in the sense of willing evil, but in the sense of bearing its mark, of having been touched by it so deeply that complete separation became impossible. This dual shadow, external and internal, political and psychological, created an impossible situation. Frodo could not escape into pastoral oblivion because the world would not remain peaceful. He could not simply rest because his own mind would not grant him peace. He could not forget because memory would not release him. He could not heal because the wounds went too deep, and the environment offered insufficient resources for the magnitude of the damage. Tolkien's presentation of this reality reflects his fundamental worldview, one shaped by Catholic theology, personal experience of war, and deep engagement with Northern European myth. In this view, the world is fallen, permanently marked by discord introduced in its very creation, subject to long defeat even as it contains moments of grace and beauty. Heroes can achieve great goods, can push back darkness, can win breathing room for light and joy. But they cannot eliminate evil, cannot permanently secure peace, cannot guarantee happy endings. This philosophy imbues Tolkien's work with its characteristic melancholy. Even the most triumphant moments carry overtones of sadness, awareness that what has been won will eventually be lost, that the current victory merely delays inevitable decline. The fourth age dawns as the age of men, but this is presented as diminishment rather than triumph. The elves depart, magic fades, the mythic gives way to the historical. Progress of a sort, perhaps, but also loss. Frodo's personal experience mirrors this larger pattern. He achieved victory, saved the world, became a hero celebrated in song and story. Yet these achievements brought him only continued suffering, only deeper isolation, only more acute awareness of all he had lost and could never recover. The shadow within him corresponded to the shadow without, each reinforcing the other, creating a feedback loop from which escape within Middle-earth became impossible. The lingering political consequences compounded his psychological distress. The scouring of the Shire, though resolved, demonstrated that evil was not vanquished, but merely dispersed. The reorganization of power following Sauron's fall created vacuums that ambitious individuals rushed to fill. The Haradrim and Easterlings, though defeated, retained their hatred and desire for vengeance. Mordor remained, its towers fallen but its land still poisoned, a festering wound in the body of Middle-earth that would require generations to heal if it ever did. For someone as sensitive as Frodo had become, these realities were unbearable. Having sacrificed everything to defeat Sauron, having endured every torment to destroy the ring, he had to witness the continuing presence of evil in different guises, the persistent suffering of innocence, the endless need for vigilance and struggle. His triumph felt hollow, his sacrifice insufficient, his great deed merely a temporary reprieve rather than lasting solution. This knowledge, that evil persists, that suffering continues, that the struggle is never finished, combined with his personal trauma to create an impossible burden. He could neither heal himself nor fix the world. He could neither forget nor forgive. He could neither remain as he was nor return to what he had been. The shadow within and the shadow without trapped him in a vice that tightened with each passing day. The only escape lay in departure, not from evil itself, which exists even in Valinor in potential if not actuality, but from the specific manifestations and memories and environments that reinforced his suffering. By sailing beyond the circles of the world, he removed himself from the immediate triggers of his trauma, from the persistent evidence of evil's survival, from the daily reminder that his sacrifice, though necessary and noble, had not been sufficient to end all suffering. Even as the world breathes easier, the heart of the ring-bearer remains heavy with echoes of shadow. The white ship moves steadily westward, propelled by winds that blow from beyond the world's end, drawn by currents that flow toward shores untouched by mortal navigation. Behind it, Middle-earth recedes, first the gray havens, then the coastline, then the very land itself dissolving into distance and memory. Before it stretches the sundering seas, vast and mysterious, marking the boundary between the mortal and the timeless, between the world that changes and the realm that endures. Upon the deck, Frodo stands in silence, his eyes fixed on the western horizon where sunset colors bleed into something beyond sunset, where the sky takes on hues that have no names in mortal tongues. Around him move the elves who crew the ship, their movements graceful and unhurried, their songs in languages that predate the rising of the sun. Beside him stands Gandalf, no longer the gray pilgrim but Olorin returned to himself, bearing wisdom and sorrow in equal measure. Nearby sits Bilbo, aged beyond bearing yet sustained by the journey's promise, murmuring verses of old walking songs adapted to this final voyage. The journey will take days or weeks or months. Time functions differently upon these waters, and measurement loses meaning in the space between worlds. But the destination is certain. Ahead lies Valinor, the blessed realm, Ammon the holy, where the valor dwell, and the light of the two trees still shines through memory and grace. What awaits Frodo there remains unwritten, deliberately ambiguous in Tolkien's telling. We receive no epilogue, no reassurance of healing achieved, no confirmation that his suffering ends in certain peace. This absence is itself a gift, a space left open for possibility rather than closed by determination. Tolkien understood that some stories resist conclusion, that some journeys end not with arrival but with the promise of arrival, that some healings are processes too gradual and complex to summarize. Yet we can imagine, drawing from hints scattered throughout the text and the logic of Tolkien's mythology, what such healing might entail. Imagine Frodo walking in gardens that bloom eternal, where no shadow falls and no flower fades. Imagine him dwelling in halls built by the Eldar in the depths of time, where beauty is not fragile but enduring, where peace is not precarious but grounded in the nature of the place itself. Imagine him conversing with beings who have witnessed the world's creation, who remember the music of the Aenir, who possess perspective vast enough to contextualize even the greatest suffering within larger patterns of meaning. Imagine him gradually, perhaps across spans of time measured in centuries by mortal reckoning, but experienced differently in that timeless land, learning to remember without being destroyed by memory. Imagine the nightmares slowly losing their power, the intrusive recollections gradually integrating into narrative rather than remaining traumatic fragments, the persistent pain easing not through forgetting, but through being held within a context large enough to contain it. Imagine him rediscovering aspects of himself that the quest had buried, the love of learning and lore that had characterized his youth, the delight in poetry and song, the capacity for friendship and joy that had been eroded by the ring's weight but never entirely eliminated. Imagine these qualities slowly re-emerging, like flowers after winter, tentative at first but gradually growing stronger, finding sustenance in soil not poisoned by evil, in air not thick with shadow. Imagine, too, that some scars remain. Tolkien did not believe in complete restoration, in the erasure of suffering as if it had never occurred. The healed Frodo of our imagination would carry still the marks of what he had endured, not as open wounds but as testimony, not as sources of continuous pain, but as evidence of what he had survived. He would be changed permanently, shaped by his experiences in ways that could not and perhaps should not be undone. But he would no longer be ruled by those changes, no longer imprisoned by his trauma, no longer separated from joy by insurmountable walls of pain. This vision of healing, gradual, incomplete, permanent in its acknowledgement that suffering changes us irrevocably yet hopeful in its insistence, that we need not be destroyed by what we have endured, represents Tolkien's mature understanding of trauma and recovery. He had witnessed the Great War's aftermath, had seen men who carried its scars for decades, had recognized that some wounds never entirely heal, but might, given time and grace, become bearable. He offered Frodo not impossible restoration, but possible peace, not erasure, but integration, not forgetting, but the ability to remember without being consumed. The ship sails on through waters that gleam with reflected starlight and something beyond starlight, through swells that rise and fall with rhythms older than the moon. The journey is itself a kind of healing, a passage through transitional space where old identity can be released and new possibilities embraced, where the rigid boundaries between self and world can soften, where transformation can occur not through violence, but through gradual opening to grace. Behind the ship, Middle-earth continues its long history, the Fourth Age unfolding, kingdoms rising and falling, new heroes emerging to face new challenges, the endless cycle of struggle and triumph and loss. Frodo's departure does not end the story, but changes it, shifts its focus from the ring-bearer to those who remain, from the great crisis of the Third Age to the quieter, but no less significant challenges of the age that follows. Yet his absence echoes. Sam, working to restore the Shire, plants seedlings from the gift Galadriel gave him and thinks of the friend who will never see them grow. Merry and Pippin, serving in the courts of Rohan and Gondor, sometimes pause mid-song, remembering the one who began the adventure with them but could not remain to see its conclusion. Aragorn, governing his kingdom with wisdom and justice, occasionally touches the ring of Barahir on his finger and contemplates the vast debt he owes to a simple hobbit he can never repay. These memories, these absences, these echoes of the departed ring-bearer weave themselves into the fabric of the Fourth Age, coloring its history with melancholy awareness that victory came at terrible cost. That peace was purchased with sacrifice, that some heroes give everything including their capacity to dwell in the world they saved. And somewhere beyond the circles of the world, on shores where different laws prevail, where time moves to different rhythms, where healing is not miraculous but natural, Frodo begins the long, slow work of recovery. He will not be the hobbit he was. That innocent youth perished in Mordor's fires. But he might, eventually, become someone who can bear the weight of who he has become, who can live with his memories without being imprisoned by them, who can find joy again even while acknowledging the pain that joy must always contain for those who have witnessed what he has witnessed. The ship sails toward dawn, toward light, toward shores where hope is not merely possibility but presence, where healing is not wished for but realized, where the ring-bearer might finally lay down his burden and rest. And so he sails beyond the sunset, leaving behind a world forever changed, carrying both its scars and its hope into the undying light. Dear listener, this story ends, but many await. Subscribe so no tale escapes you.